Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion today. Thank you very much for taking the time to join in. I'd like to hand over to Faith Mueni, who will be doing the introduction to this afternoon's event. Faith, over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Vishan, for that. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today in this webinar, which is dubbed Cyber Awareness in the Wake of Increased Cybercrime. We are very, very glad that you could make time to join us as we have this very interesting discussion around cybersecurity challenges that we're facing in the industry across all organizations, all industries, and what role awareness then plays when it comes to reducing the risk in as far as cybersecurity attacks are concerned. So this webinar is being hosted by Sentinel Africa in conjunction with KnowBe4. And I would just like to go ahead and do a very brief introduction of who Sentinel Africa is, as well as the panelists, and also who KnowBe4 are. Okay, so great. Okay, so Sentinel Africa is a risk-based, is a risk management consulting firm based in Nairobi, Kenya, but with operations spanning across Africa and also in the UAE. And at Sentinel Africa, we concern ourselves with making our clients win and making sure that our clients get the best in as far as cybersecurity and risk management consulting goes. So how we do that is basically first understanding that every organization is different in terms of the context of where the organization operates in, the regulation that every organization has, and even up to their main business and their core activities that they conduct. And because of that, then it means that there will never be one solution for cybersecurity that fits all clients. And so the best way to approach it, how we have coined it, is that we first seek to understand the client. So who are you? Which country are you operating from? What's your main business? What do you do? How do you interact with your clients? How do you interact with different stakeholders? How do you interact with regulators? And then after understanding that, then we actually already pick out risks that you could be possibly exposed to. And then we tailor our solutions to make sure they actually speak and address the organization's context. And then after that, we do embedding. And embedding for us is very critical because we have seen time and time again whereby weaknesses in terms of cybersecurity weaknesses are still the same across the years. There was a vulnerability that was exploited majorly in 2017. That was the WannaCry ransomware. Anybody ever heard of it? I'm sure we all did. And it's so funny that even when we do vulnerability assessment and penetration testing in 2021, the same vulnerabilities are still recurring. And so for us, this basically shows that organizations out here are basically implementing cybersecurity projects or even conducting some of these assurance tests as a compliance need, for example. So you're due for an audit by a regulator. Then what do? You invite someone to come and help you do an assurance assessment in your environment, and then that's just it. The results sit there, no one ever does anything about it. And so now we have taken an approach where apart from just giving you a solution that works, we also make sure that it is embedded in the organization. And how do we do that? We have several services. So we have risk and advisory, where we basically look at what will resolve a client's cybersecurity needs in a long-term perspective. So when you're looking at risk and advisory, we're looking at things such as business continuity and basically coming up with business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, and also implementing information security management systems that are actually sensible and things that will continually keep improving across a period of time. We also do assurance assessments as well. So this includes vulnerability assessment, pen testing, system audits, basically doing this in a continuous way to make sure that we and identify issues, and then after that we hold an organization towards remediating these issues so that it's not something that stays open even long after you've already left. We also do a lot of automation. What we have also seen is that any process that is actually implemented in a manual way, we almost always introduce vulnerabilities to the environment one way or another. So in our operations, in our day-to-day activities, we have identified solutions that actually go into making sure that some of these critical vulnerabilities, some of these advanced persistent threats are actually, identified, and also implementing automation to make sure that you basically are able to conduct some of these security awareness and security controls implementation in an automated way. And these include things such as KnowBe4, which is a tool that we use for cybersecurity awareness. So instead of doing trainer-led discussions, trainer-led awareness training sessions, which may not always be effective, can you implement your training information security awareness program through an automated platform, a computer-based platform that then users can interact with? And apart from just training, and it has very great interactive features, can you also be able to test how well your information security awareness program is working? And then also apart from that, we do training. Again, apart from information security awareness, training on the different aspects around information security. So business continuity, information security awareness itself, IT service management, quality management, data privacy, and such. And then last but not least, also, we offer managed security services to our clients. And so managed security services are geared towards implementing long-term solutions for clients instead of involving different vendors who then introduce different technologies, and the organization is left wondering, then how do we make all these technologies work together? So we are a managed security services provider that allows an organization to have a one-time spend towards cybersecurity efforts, and then we can start by doing cybersecurity strategy that is risk-based, that informs the journey of an organization towards achieving a concrete cybersecurity stature over a period of, say, like 3 years. So these are the main key things that we do at Sentinel Africa. And we're very, very glad that you could join us today again for this webinar. And then I will take it back to you, Rishan, so that you can go ahead and introduce the panelists and also an introduction of who KnowBe4 is. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Faith. I appreciate the introduction. I would now like to hand over to the SVP of Content Strategy and Evangelist from KnowBe4, named Anna Collard. Anna has been in the industry for many, many years and has quite a lot of insight to share with you. I hope you enjoy her presentation today, followed by the panel discussion. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Risha. Let me just share my screen. I'm not allowed to, it says like, you cannot start screen. There we go. Okay, apologies for that. Okay, just checking that you can see it.
All good.
Okay, great. Okay, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Faith, for the introduction, and thank you so much for all the other panelists and everyone participating today. I'm going to just talk about slightly, just a few minutes on the state of cybersecurity or cybercrime in general, if we look back into 2020 and what that means in terms of awareness or cybersecurity culture. Okay, I'm not going to bore you about my profile. I hope that if you are on LinkedIn or Twitter, it would be nice to get in touch, and all my details are on there. If we think about cyber criminals, they are, and that's why they're criminals, they're generally pretty lazy and they will do whatever's the easiest. And unfortunately, it is one of the easiest ways to get into a system, by attacking the human rather than technology. And why is that? It's because our operating systems, or the way we interact, we haven't really been upgraded. Like technology gets upgraded all the time. So we still very much react to emotions and have this sort of instinctive and reptilian brain in us that unfortunately makes us quite easily manipulated. And social engineering, or people hackers, this is a so-called term, they use that that reality. And if we think about social engineering, it's not something that is only happening in the online world. Like, I'm sure you've come across, you know, really good salespeople, for example. They usually use these kind of persuasion techniques and sometimes slightly manipulative psychological tricks to get us to do something that we may not necessarily, you know, agree with. Like, I mean, I bought shoes in a shop before that I, in retrospect, really didn't want because the salesperson was really good. So that's a form of social engineering. But in the online or cyber, you know, sort of cyber world, cyber criminals use the same tactics that con artists or sort of you know, really good social engineers are using, and the like manipulation, psychology, misdirection, misinformation, and they use that to get us to participate in their scams. And ultimately, what do social engineers or people hacker want to do? Well, they want to suppress our critical thinking. And we have these like two walnut-sized big centers in the back of our brains, which is sort of a part of our older reptilian brains called the amygdala. And what happens when we feel emotions, and that could be a low-grade form of fear or maybe authority, but even positive emotions, you know, when they get processed, then what happens is the amygdala, which is also called the fear center, takes over and it shuts off our critical thinking or our frontal lobes. And that's exactly what the cyber criminals want. They want us to not think logically, not think critically, and just click on stuff that we usually, if you think with common sense or logic, we wouldn't do that. How do they do that? Well, they use different tactics or mechanisms or different channels, sometimes also a combination of all of them. Phishing obviously is, you know, sort of sending fake emails or attacks via email, and then also over the phone, which is called vishing, over text messages, WhatsApp, Telegram, social media as well. And in some cases, they may even appear in person, like they sometimes dress up as a supplier to get into your office or your home. So it's important to be aware of this. And if you do get a phone call, for example, that pressurizes you by either pretending to be a senior figure or, you know, like someone that says there's like a sense of urgency with it, then we always tell our users to, you know, take a deep breath and like consider that this could be a scam and don't just react with your emotions. What's quite interesting is that Interpol have released a report about the impact of cybercrime during the COVID pandemic. And you can see here that phishing and sort of social engineering scams were some of the top, sort of the top impacts that cybercrime had on the economy. Then also what I find quite interesting is that, and more so by the way than malicious software or ransomware, and then if we look at fake news, this is also again something where social engineering plays a role. We are, as people, we are 6 times more likely to share fake news than we share the truth. Why? Because again, they use emotional content to get us to suppress our sort of critical thinking. Also, what I found quite interesting, Verizon, they bring out the data breach reports every year. So their 2020 report confirmed that hacking incidents were made up like about half of all the sort of data breaches. And of those, 80% were due to credential theft or sort of brute force, like hacking, cracking of passwords and usernames. Then human errors and social engineering attacks. So this were really the 3 top kind of reasons of why data breaches happened last year. Also, what I find very interesting, and this is something like we did a survey across various African organizations last year, and ransomware was right on top in terms of our concern on the continent with regards to cybercrime. But if you look at the top malware varieties from last year, ransomware actually only made it onto number 3, and the cyber criminals are focusing their attention more towards credential theft, stealing passwords, getting onto, let's say, for example, your privileged access on the cloud systems, stealing your administrator passwords. So that is really one of the top sort of themes or threats that we're seeing, is that the bad guys want our users' credentials. And those are the top phishing attacks, the top social engineering attacks are all around credential theft and sort of password theft. Why are we at higher risk right now? I just heard before we kicked off that apparently, and I'm so sorry to hear that in Kenya you're going through the second wave of the pandemic. We've just been through our second wave in South Africa. Luckily, our numbers are coming down. But unfortunately, you know, that means that a lot of us are still, or again, being asked to work from home and sort of social distance ourselves. And what happens with people in general when we are sort of forced to work from home with our kids around us, and you're stressed, when you're stressed and distracted, and also even if you don't have the family around and you just sort of read the news, and we all feed into this collective anxiety that's going around, what happens is that our brains again revert back to the reptilian brain or the heuristic thinking brain, and that makes us more vulnerable to social engineering attacks, unfortunately. What's coming in the future? What can we expect? We've already seen actually phishing attacks, sort of, you know, voicemails that were left on people's phone using deepfake technology, where the voicemail impersonated the executives or the CEO's voice, and leaving a message to say, well, you need to act on this right now. And that, if you consider, if you receive an email, let's say, that's spoofing your CEO, followed up by a voicemail that sounds exactly like the CEO, the chances are that you're quite likely to act. Also, more extortion schemes like double ransom. There's a lot of that going around, where the bad guys not just hold the data at ransom, but sort of threaten to release it unless the ransom is paid. So what can we do to actually address that, or sort of get our people to become our strongest assets? So security culture is, I think, what this whole webinar is all about, and security awareness. So there's three tips that I would like to share with you. So the number one is, like anything in life, you know, we can't really manage what we can't measure. So the first thing is to go out and identify how good or bad is my security culture or security awareness level at the moment. What are the areas that our people need more help with? And there are certain surveys or sort of assessments that we can run that will provide you an insight into how good or bad your current status is. And that can also allow for measurement over time and showing return on investment in terms of where you have improved. The second tip is to not overload our poor people with too much information. Like, you know, what happens is if I throw too many policies and security buzzwords at the poor users, nothing will stick. So we have to really be quite clear in the messaging and limit it to sort of the 2-3 core messages that we want our people to remember, and then make it personally relevant, make it quite short, sort of sticky. If we can engage their emotions in a positive way, that's a good way of getting training or awareness messages across, making it relevant to them. And then thirdly, this is where it becomes really effective. If you combine the training or the awareness content with frequent, and when I say frequent, I really mean like not just once a quarter, but preferably every month, or in our case, like we get phished every week. So combine your awareness training with frequent phishing simulations. That does two things. First of all, it also provides you with a metric that you can measure to see, you know, how bad is it, how many people are falling for the phishing, the mock phishing emails. But it also is a training tool, because anyone who falls for a fake phishing email will remember to be more careful next time. And as I mentioned, in our case, we do get mock phishing emails every week, and they're random. So I get a different one to my colleagues. And what happens is it gamifies the whole experience. So because I know that our IT department is trying to catch us out, I look at every single email, that even the ones that look like they come from inside, extra carefully, because I know they're trying to phish us. And that's really where, you know, what KnowBe4 is all about. So we provide the sort of tools to manage that whole process. We've got the assessments, we've got the training content and the phishing, and we combine that in a platform that allows for automation of these steps and sort of frees up your time to focus on, you know, on other security pressing items. Something that is quite interesting as well is when we go into an environment for the very first time, and this is not just in Africa, this is globally, and we run a phishing simulation test. In general, the average hit rate is 30%. That means 1 out of 3 people will fall for that phishing attack. Within just 3 months of running sort of continuous or frequent phishing simulations with some training, that number reduces down to 15%. And then within a year, you can, again, this is an average number, but the average number then goes all the way down to below 5% or 2% of the average year. And that is a pretty good sort of risk reduction if you consider that your 1 out of 3 sort of people risk became way less within the span of just 12 months. So that's just it in terms of a little intro from my side. Like in summary, you know, we do need to do more to change our security cultures, specifically now that we have so much sort of dependency on our people working remotely, working from home, the fact that they are more vulnerable, and the fact that the bad guys are using social engineering tactics and sort of techniques to get into our environment via our people. However, the good news is by applying the right levers, it's not rocket science. It's actually relatively simple to set up. You can see results relatively or fairly quickly. So that is it. So much for me. And I think the next step is to actually start and introduce the panelists. So I'm just going to stop this and then give me a second.
Thank you so much, Anna. Faith will take over and do a brief introduction of the panelists before we kick off the discussion.
Okay, I've got the slides here too, if you want me to put them up.
All right, yeah, sure. That will be good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna.
Can you see it should be Stanley now?
It's in presenter mode, so we can see the
Let's do this.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So going right into looking at the panelists today, we'll start by introducing Stanely Chege, who's currently the Group CIO at Jubilee Insurance. So Stanley has a vast experience across different industries, such as manufacturing, banking, healthcare, and fund management in IT. So he is an MBA. He has apart from that,
Faith, I think we lost you there. Okay, I'm just gonna, I think there might be technical difficulties on Faith's side. So let me just take over. So Stanley, it's an honor to meet you at this panel. As you can see, like you come with a lot of experience, so many acronyms, like you're a CISSP, a CISA, CNA, CISM. Oh my gosh, so you really have everything that it takes to be called a security expert or security professional. And you're also a member of the PMI Institute, ISACA, and IC Square. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Great, I'm going to introduce the next panelist. Okay, that's me. Then Mueni, I hope I pronounced this correctly. Mueni is from Sentinel, Africa, and she's also an information security consultant with quite a lot of certification and acronyms against her name. So she's also a certified trainer and a lead pen test professional. She's a CISA, she's a CISSP, she's a ISO 27000 lead implementer and lead auditor, and an engineer. So Mueni is also a Fortinet network security expert. So welcome, Mueni. It's an honor to have you on the panel today.
Thank you.
It's really impressive to see all the accolades that you've got. It's nice to have more girls in the industry too.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And then we've got Dennis Echeru, is that, I hope I pronounced this correctly, apologies if I did it. And Dennis also, he has years of experience. He is currently the Chief Risk Officer at the Centenary Bank and is responsible there for their risk management programs. He, again, as the other panelists, he's got various accreditations against his name. He's a member of multiple associations like the Professional Risk Managers International Association in New York, the Global Association of Risk Professionals, Chief Risk Officers, and many others. So thank you for joining us today, Dennis. I really look forward to your views and opinions, and we're honored to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Anna. My pleasure, indeed.
Okay, great. So what I thought of doing is to give each of the panelists an opportunity to maybe just give us within 5 minutes your view of the situation, specifically around what you've experienced in the last year. What is the sort of security culture situation in your view in your area as well as your organization, and just sort of an intro about the topic, and then we will lead into multiple questions and also take questions from the audience. So I'd like to maybe start off with, ladies first, with Mueni, if you don't mind just giving us your view within like a 5-minute sort of introduction.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Anna. So I realized when I was doing the speaker's introduction, I was actually on mute, but thank you for going ahead and doing that. Apologies for that. So yeah, cool. So now cybersecurity awareness in the wake of increased cybercrime. I think for me, when I really think about why it's very important even for us to be having this panel discussion today, is the fact that cybersecurity is not something new and cyber awareness is not actually something new. It's been around for a while, but still information security threats and cyber attacks are still rampant across all industries, everywhere in different continents. Cyber attacks are still rampant, yeah? And I'm reminded of recent major attacks that were supply chain attacks targeting #1 SolarWinds and then also Microsoft Exchange servers, which when you look at how these attacks were perpetrated, it was through people, okay? The people who actually operate these softwares. And then the impact was actually felt very across a very wide base of end users, because these are people who actually supply this. This is an attack on a vendor who supplies technology that is actually used by very many people across the world, yeah? And so the thing is that organizations have gone out here and actually spent on cybersecurity. People have implemented technologies that are actually top-notch. When you look at the security incident and event management system, you also look at the database security and database activity monitoring solutions. You look at next generation firewalls, look at endpoint detection and response and antivirus systems. They're all actually very dope systems that are rating high in the Gartner quadrant. But then still, you find that even with all this next level generation technology, we're still getting people who are actually getting compromised through cyber attacks. And so why then do we still have this sort of activities going on. And it all boils down to the very basic controls that organizations need to implement to secure their infrastructure. And the first one and the most common being end users. So in as much as we have a next generation technologies that we have implemented, people are the ones, or rather staff are the ones that operate this technology, yeah? But then you find that staff always like circumventing processes for one reason or another. You know that you're not allowed to install any applications on your computer, according to the company policy, but you'll still find that someone will request the IT admin to allow them to download some applications here or there for one reason or another. You still are told that if you did not participate in our lottery, for example, or in any competition of sorts, if you receive an email in your mailbox that is telling you that you've won an award for one thing or another, you definitely are supposed to be smart and think that it wasn't actually me who participated, so there's no way this thing can be legit, right? And so it all boils down to the people who are operating the technology, the end users who are in charge of information which is the most critical asset that we have right now. And so basically, for me, I think a big percentage of vulnerabilities that we are seeing today would actually be reduced, and these risks can be reduced and tamed if we go back and train end users on cybersecurity awareness. First of all, do you understand the role you play in the organization? And do you understand the kind of access you have and what would happen if your access was actually compromised by someone who's unauthorized, right? And so then after that, you continuously train people to be able to actually avoid such attacks. And so that's being a very key thing that we need to speak over and over and over again until we get to a point where after we do a test, after we do even an announced phishing test, we still will get people who actually understand and are able to detect a phishing attack and be able to avoid such attacks.
Thank you so much, Faith. And I think the example you used is exactly that. And it plays into, the whole emotional sense again. Like, yes, you never played the lottery, but maybe in the moment you get so excited that you think, oh my gosh, I have to have a look at it, right? And unfortunately, and it's especially with people and I've seen it in South Africa, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in Kenya, but we have a lot of people that have become quite desperate financially, and they've been falling for these scams, like these investment scams, because they're now not getting enough income through their other jobs, and the scammers are using that, and they're offering this way too good to be true investment scams. And you'd think people should know better, but unfortunately, when you're desperate, you're in the moment, it sounds great, and they fall for it. So yeah, thanks for your intro. That I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Faith. I'm going over to Stanley. What are your views? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the topic, and how have you experienced the whole cybercrime situation in the last few months, or the last 12 months? Oh, you're still on mute.
Anna,
There you go.
I enjoyed your presentation today, especially showing us that our brain heuristic, you call it heuristic thinking, can also play a role in how we are attacked, because we get defensive, we panic, and especially now, the time of COVID, when people are working from home, they're panicked. They are wondering, am I going to be the next person to be infected with corona? Some are working from home on half salary, you know that. Some were laid off. And as all these are human issues, these are personal issues, because it's everybody's interest to extend and perpetuate their stay. So you'll expect that the sense of panic, the sense of helplessness, the sense of urgency and anxiety is there. And as people work from home, they are vulnerable to these cyber attackers. And these cyber attackers have got so much time in terms of patience. They have been trained to be patient. They have got so much time in terms of bandwidth. Sometimes they even take over your CPU processing capability, okay, and try to obviously attack you using that capability or CPU capacity they have taken from you. So what has happened, especially in Kenya? We saw that companies sent most people home around May last year so that they can work from home, because at that time, there was not much information coming from either the employers about the long-term effects of the pandemic. There was not, everybody was groping in the dark. We didn't know how to manage this pandemic, and everybody was panicking that time. So companies didn't have very elaborate business continuity plans, and they were grappling, where do we start? So they sent people to work from home, and they deployed what most people had was virtual private networks. But these virtual private networks were deployed in a rush. They're not well tested. Yes? And obviously cyber attackers know that they can use man-in-the-middle attacks. So many organizations were attacked via these virtual private networks that were rolled out in a rush because they were not secure. Other companies rolled out tools like desktop as a service on the cloud. Other organizations rolled out a virtual desktop infrastructure to reduce the amount of processing capability and bandwidth that users from home were applying. But then VDI technologies and the DAS technologies were rolled out very fast. So technology was an afterthought. I mean, let's say security was an afterthought. So cyber attackers took the chance. They took this chance and went in and intercepted these VDI infrastructures, the DAS infrastructure and the VPN infrastructure. So like Mueni said, organizations are spending so much time on these tools. The latest firewall, it's shiny, it's very shiny. The latest antivirus, they're calling it EDR. It's very shiny.
And XDR.
Yes, it's very shiny. The latest database activity monitoring tools to check who is changing database fields, because database becomes the crown jewel of an organization. Who is changing the database fields? Who is changing employees and customer data, especially now with the Data Privacy Act of 2019. So organizations rolled out all these tools, but what organizations forgot is the human element is the weakest link, is the final frontier that fights against cyber threats. So there was not much time to train users about how to protect themselves and how to be vigilant, because more time was spent on rolling out tools. In fact, we're calling it rolling out VPNs and remote access tools. It became more of a roll out remote access tools than come up with a very comprehensive business continuity management framework that looks at all issues of people, process, and technology. And attacks increased. And I know from many research organizations, Poneman Institute, IBM, attacks increased tenfold in the month of July and August. That's the time that human resource departments and the CEOs started thinking, why don't we start training our users about the risks out there on this dark web, on the internet, when we start training our people, because we know now we have rolled out these tools, We have invested a lot, but we are not seeing return on investment because we have forgotten the most important element, that is human. And the human element is so weak. We just need to be baited by a trip to the Bahamas. Click on that link, trip to the Bahamas. Would I want to go to the Bahamas? So, where I was working that time, we got together and decided, let's start training people on the dangers out there on the internet. Let's start training our employees. But there's no cohesive framework for security awareness training. I mean, we didn't have a cohesive framework. We would get some artwork from the internet and roll it out to from the internet and roll it out through our intranet. Some from artwork, some saying change your password every 30 days, don't click on links. Some saying please be careful about public Wi-Fi services. So really, it was not very well thought out strategy for security awareness training. The tools were not comprehensive and cohesive. The artwork was not comprehensive and cohesive. And obviously, we started well. The intention was good, but it was not effective. Obviously, we ensured it's not only our employees that knew about this artwork we were sending out using our intranet, and obviously integrated the Active Directory, but also our agents. We have, as an insurance company, we have got more agents than employees. Remember, agents are more, they're free, they're freelancers. So they don't access our Active Directory. So they bring their own device. That really multiplies the amount of risk that we're facing, because the bring your own device also means that the kind of devices that we're using may not be standardized devices. They may not have the network access control tools. They may not have the latest antivirus. May not have the latest tools to protect. So this was compounded. The problems compounded. And then, so we started talking to different companies to help us on how we can train our users on security awareness training. We're still in that journey, and we know that sooner or later we'll get the best tools for that. But I can tell you one thing, we have learned a lot from the fact that we threw all the technology at the problem, all the money at the problem. But the problems get compounded by the panic the employees were feeling, the anxiety our employees are feeling out there working from home due to this pandemic. That's the learning we have got for now, and I will share more as we continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Yeah, very good points. And I totally agree with you. I think it's also really important that your security awareness program there has to be a strategy behind it. Like I mentioned earlier in my talk, we can't just throw messages at the users and expect them to now change their behavior. It really needs to be something that is planned for, that you have a program in the background that combines the right messaging with the right simulation, and also prioritizes the type of content that you do want, or the behavior that you do want to see in your people. Because I may be aware, but that doesn't necessarily mean I care, right? I'm aware that I'm only allowed to drive 60 in a certain zone. Whether I really change my driving style is a different story. So it's all about changing behaviors more so than just creating the awareness, even though awareness is the first step, obviously. So thank you, Stanley, for that. And I'm hoping that KnowBe4 that we'll be able to show you what we can do, and when you look at the different providers. But yeah, Dennis, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Let's go over to you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. This topic is very much appropriate, and I thank you for that, because currently this is the much talked topic, especially in the telecoms, the banking, those industries. Cyber security is real. It is something really you cannot underrate at the moment. And it is taking much more attention than even other risks. For us in the banking industry, definitely this is one of the top risks now to closely monitor. And you know what is happening in almost every strategy plan of the businesses. You realize that digitalization is one of the key aspects in those strategy plans in many companies now. And cybercrime thrives so well with digitalization. As you digitalize more, you must be careful, because that is a fertile ground for cybersecurity, cybercrime. So we need to be very, very careful. And we've taken note of that, of course, as a bank, and also in the industry. That is something which is being addressed. And of course, this brings me to the challenge. One of the things when I looked at Mr. Google is that it is clearly stated that more than 77% of organizations do not have a cyber security incident response plan. You can see that makes it even worse. 77%. This is some information if you visit Mr. Google, and yet it is said that there is a hacker attack every 39 seconds. So there is no company which has not been hacked. We are being hacked all the time. Only that we may not be we may not be in the know. We may not be knowing that they are actually attempting, that the hackers are attempting on our systems. So that is another very, very serious risk. And indeed, even us in the banking industry, when we monitor these risks, one of the key risks we have noted is of course, the increased targeted phishing emails, especially. That has been there, and it comes out. But what do you do? We need to ensure that we enhance the email filtering solutions, so that we're able to get these hackers, these scams and all what rejected. So that is one of the things which is coming out very, very clearly. Now, with the COVID-19 coming on board, first of all, this one took the world unaware, and it came the way it hit the businesses. Some businesses have collapsed, others are struggling to recover. The others do not even never had a business continuity plans in place. It makes it even heightened. And when I again look at some of the statistics I got when I got to Mr. Google, I can read a few. You find that actually COVID has even heightened the cybersecurity crime. For example, it is stated that since COVID-19 came, the US FBI has reported a 300% increase in reported cyber crimes. You can imagine. It's also reported that email scams related to COVID-19 surged at 667% in March 2020. This is the time most countries actually put a dreaded lockdown, and you can see what happened at that time. It's also reported that, as my colleague has said, 95% of the cybersecurity breaches are due to human error. So we might be investing resources in other areas when actually the biggest problem is what? The human error. And again, we need to look at that, and that is true. Most organizations have gone investing into solutions. They have gone investing into remote working systems to try to counter on this. And again, as I said, it makes cybercrime even thrive more. There are risks associated with the procuring solutions. Third-party risk, for example, you don't know which risk you're picking up. That is another thing. Again, we need to be very careful again as we manage this risk. Then, of course, remote working, people are now is no longer, you have gotten people to work from home or from other places remotely, but you don't have that control to manage the data confidentiality, the information. That is another big problem. The big data now, data confidentiality. We need to ensure that we manage. But this is, people are working from home. You don't know who is there looking at what. You don't know everything. So again, it compounds even the problem further. You need to ensure that we manage that. It's also stated that 90% of the newly created coronavirus domains are scamming. So there's all attacks, there's all cybersecurity crime. Now it is being heightened, and we need to see that we manage this. Of course, as a bank, just like other organizations have tried, we have to put in place a robust business continuity plan to counter on this. But all this goes with, you need to have a budget in place. You need to procure, as I said, the right appropriate systems. You need to have the right people. At the time of the COVID, it was a very, very serious challenge. Who were the right people you need to be in place, the critical resource? How do you communicate to people? How do you manage people working from home, supervising them? All that was a big challenge. So you find that the issue is not something to be underrated. And I think cyber crime, security crime, as I said earlier, is a very appropriate topic. And we want to see that, something is invested to manage this. Of course, what do we need to do? As you said, there must be awareness. The culture, the cyber security culture must come, but it must be brought up by the top management. It must come from top so that everybody starts to understand. But most important, the consequences. I think in Africa, Uganda, East Africa, and Africa, we've not seen a lot of penalties and fines related to cybersecurity. I mean, they have hacked other companies, and you can find, that's why the new regulations have come on board. And some of these, can be related to money launderers. And if your system is not, if you procure the system and it's not able to manage this risk, you are exposed, you get exposed. And that becomes a challenge with the increased regulation now coming in. So what are we going to see? I am seeing in future, in the near future, the focus will be in the cloud computing, mobile computing is also another thing, and big data. Those are critical things to look into as we manage cybercrime security. I thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, very, very good. I mean, a lot of the stats that you referenced, they're quite shocking when one considers what's going on. Also, I remember last year some of our local companies or customers, sorry, that are big insurance companies as well. I remember them having to set up remote working and VPN within 2 or 3 days, and there was a project that originally they planned to do over 8 months, and now they had to cram it all into 2-3 days. And obviously, I think as Stanley mentioned, that's where the mistakes happen and the misconfiguration, and the bad guys are using that, so we'll be using that. The other point then is that you mentioned, which is such a good point to remember, is that unfortunately on the African continent, on the one hand side, we do have that sort of growth and digitization. We've got the youth that's all coming online, mainly using mobile devices. We've got all the sort of mobile financial transaction happening, which is all amazing and great and sort of showing the opportunity. But at the same time, the criminals are shifting their attention towards the emerging economies, towards Africa, because they know we don't have the mature regulations in place. Maybe in certain countries like Kenya, you've got your Data Protection Act. South Africa is busy. We're going to sort of enact ours in July. But it's still, compared to Europe or the rest of the world, it's very disparate and immature, unfortunately. And the bad guys know that. So it's like a safe harbor for them to operate in Africa. And that makes us, again, the companies as well as our users, attractive targets to them. So I'd like to just I think that a lot of your viewpoints confirmed, if I can just summarize it, that sort of the people factor is a really important point to consider. It's no use just investing only in the latest shiny, I think you called it the shiny toys, right? Even though I believe that technology is absolutely, that's the sort of the process, and technology is very important, and you want to invest, for example, as Dennis said, in great mail sort of filtering technology, so that your users get as little exposure to scams and social engineering attacks as possible. But even with the best tool out there, there will always be a way that messages go through, and that's where we then have to hook in with the security culture or the security awareness. So I'd like to maybe go back to Faith and ask you, like, in your experience and, you know, the companies that you're dealing with, what are some of the things that have worked really well? Like, what are the, because I'd like to share with the audience some sort of practical tips that they can take back into their organizations in terms of, you know, really addressing the challenge. Like, what works in securing your remote workforce? We've heard all about the challenges now, but what are the things that work well? And also in terms of, you know, sort of future security challenges, are there any tips that you can share with the audience that they should focus on?
Right. So taking it back to first, the challenges that we are seeing in the market, and especially after COVID-19, is that, first of all, yes, we definitely have seen an increase in cyber attacks across different sectors. In that period alone, towards and especially towards the third and fourth quarter of 2020 and also the beginning of 2021, we have dealt with incident response and incident management for a couple of, actually very many clients with regards to ransomware attacks, right? And basically, this is a situation where you wake up one day and you're locked out of your servers, you no longer can access your systems, you no longer can work, employees basically can no longer work. And we saw that the common attack vectors that were actually used were, number one, social engineering. So again, basically targeting users, because attackers know there's this technology. So using the easy way and targeting users and basically getting a hold of credentials that they were not supposed to, or even sharing a link that initiates a drive-by download that goes undetected even by the best technologies that we've implemented in terms of EDR. And so, yeah, we saw a lot of such attacks happening in organizations, and especially with remote working. I remember having a conversation with one of our clients out of Kenya who was saying that they were in this situation where they control their environment using Microsoft Active Directory, right? That is for centralized user access and access to resources, etc. So you have policies up to and including for passwords to expire after a set period of days, in this case was 45 days. And so you have staff working from home. For a user to be able to initiate a domain credential change, they have to be connected to the internal network of the organization for them to be able to communicate with the domain, and so that they can initiate a change of their credentials. But then all of a sudden now you are working from home and you're restricted. In fact, you're in a lockdown, you're no longer allowed to come to the office. Only people who are in the office are essential staff. And so you have IT and InfoSec working from the office. And so what they were telling us they had to do was that these employees had to send in their credentials to the IT admin, so that the IT admin can input their username and passwords so that they can initiate the credential change from the office. So how effective is that? First of all, how do you even trust that when you give someone your legitimate credentials, they're not going to use them to try and see what other resources you're using to authenticate using the same credentials. And then also, even after they change this password, they obviously cannot tell you to give you a one-time password which forces you to change, because how will you change the password? You're not in the network. So basically we had a situation where the admin had passwords for users that are actually currently active and they have access to the entire network. That poses a very big risk. The other thing was also, staff have to work from home, but systems are hosted on premise, okay? And so you have to get licenses, VPN licenses, to allow users to connect remotely. Of course, organizations did not budget for such expenses. And we're looking at organizations that have up to like 2,000 workforce, yeah? So all these people, 2,000 VPN licenses, currently find that VPN licenses have been procured only for like IT and InfoSec and maybe risk people who need to connect to the environment when they need to. So when you think about scaling this to cover all the 2,000 workforce, it's crazy, right? And so because no one is giving you that budget, and again, COVID happened, and so security was an afterthought, you would get admins downloading free software for remote access that then they're giving people, or rather staff, to just run this software. When you do use this IP address and use your credentials, and voila, you'll connect to the network, right? And then also, again, meetings have to happen. So you're using, there was Zoom, there was Skype for Business, there was Kaizala, there was Microsoft Teams, all these platforms that enable collaboration and communication for teams remotely. Again, the decisions to actually use what technology were made on the fly. And so you find that Zoom was the thing then. And so almost everybody onboarded their remote working conversations, etc., on Zoom. And then we had Zoom bombing, right? And so we had processes around how we onboard software into the environment. We have to do non-functional security requirements analysis, but then that was thrown out of the window in the wake of COVID-19, and it's what works now because it needs to work. Businesses need to continue working, and so security became an afterthought completely. And so for me, looking at this situation and analyzing it, I was critically reminded of the fact that we simply just ignore the basics. We at any one point should never, first of all, ignore processes. Processes are very critical, and they're not there for compliance purposes. They're not there just so that you can look good on paper and show that you have an active and working information security management system, or that your BCMS, your business continuity plan, is actually working because it's there, it's on paper, it's good on paper. And then when a pandemic hits, it looked as if no one was actually prepared. So number one, processes are there to guide an organization in how to act in such periods, including the pandemic. And so if you have a teleworking policy, again, it's time to go back to that teleworking policy and see what does the policy say about teleworking now that people are working remotely. And so that you approach these decisions from a risk-informed perspective vis-a-vis doing things just haphazardly. The other thing, apart from processes, again, is the basic controls that go into building a secure information security architecture and framework. So you know very well that you're using endpoints that become outdated every now and then. And as you've seen, there are zero-day attacks that leverage on missing patches, imagine. And then now we have attacks that are leveraging on missing patches from 2010, right? And so you cannot be ignorant of the fact that you're using technology that needs to be patched. You cannot be ignorant of the fact that you need to monitor your environment 24/7 to be able to detect any strange activity, abnormal activity. You can't be ignorant of the fact that a finance admin logging into the enterprise resource management system in the middle of the night is normal, because that's not normal. That is something that is supposed to be flagged as abnormal. So again, what we advise clients is that go back to the basics of information security, rely on a well-known standard. We have very good standards out here. We have ISO 27001 for information security management systems, which basically enables an organization to adopt all the relevant security domains, and it gives you very well-defined controls which you can implement. We have NIST 853 publication, which basically is geared towards the 5 domains in cybersecurity. How do you detect, how do you prevent, how do you even react and respond even after an attack? So again, rely on these standards, rely on professionals, rely on managed security services providers that already have these technologies and have the know-how on how to be able to implement these standards and these technologies, and help you even handhold you through the period where your the organization is mature enough to run with continuing to implement the risk-based decisions. And then lastly, but not least, is awareness. So we really cannot stress this enough for staff, that awareness is a very critical component for an organization that is interested in, not having an information security management framework that is working on paper, but is actually working in reality in the wake of a pandemic like COVID-19, that you have to sit back and actually understand what is the problem. We're seeing scams that are coming through business email, right? So I know that you're the head of finance. I fashion an email that is very specific to your operations. And because it's relevant to what I do, I'm definitely going to fall for it, right? And so how do you even fashion a training and awareness program that is not general? So training and awareness, first of all, is good, right? But then how do you fashion an awareness program that is not just general to the entire organization? Can you fashion an awareness program that is very specific to the different functional groups in your organization? That a new joiner is trained on simple things such as tailgating and importance of changing passwords and actually understanding the policies of an organization. And that someone from the customer service desk is actually trained on how to detect phishing calls. When someone is calling you and asking very specific question, you need to be able to know that this is an attacker. Do they even know that there's something like phishing, right? That you're not supposed to just give information to anybody who comes to ask. So basically doing information awareness going all the way to the board level, because this is an organization-wide effort. Attacks are not focused only on the operational team, but even on the board. I know that you're in the senior management team or even in the governance body of this organization. I can even make you a target as a cyber criminal, make you a target and take advantage of what you know and the role you play in the organization to harm an organization, right? So basically going back to the simple security controls, those are the things that matter, because even with all these firewalls and SIEMs and downs, if you pile all this technology on top of a network which is poor in terms of the basic infrastructure and topology, then it still won't make sense. If you have a dam which is very expensive and you expect for it to be able to work optimally when users still authenticate to the database using service accounts, generic accounts such as admin and guest, as in it still beats the purpose. So going back to the very basic controls, that is what matters. Technology over time will change. EDRs will come and they'll become XDRs, as Stanley was saying. But at the end of the day, the basic security controls still remain the same. And those are the critical things that we need to worry about. Thanks,
Faith. That was quite a few to take in. I'm just going to try and summarize it. So for companies to, and especially, you know, as you mentioned, like a lot of the companies have been hit with budget cuts, and it's very difficult to prioritize in times like these. So what do you do if you don't have necessarily the enough resources? So by prioritizing, by really taking a risk-based approach, going back to basics, using standards such as ISO or the NIST standard as like a guidance, and not necessarily as a checkbox, but more as a risk-based approach. And if we do take a risk-based approach, then, and this is exactly what Faith said, then your security awareness, just like preventing social engineering and patch management is two of the major controls that will affect about 80% of the threats that are incoming. So if you can do two things, then those are two that I would suggest focusing on. And then obviously, I really loved what you said. You can't build a house or fancy shiny toys on top of a dump. So getting the basics right is really important. Thanks, Faith. Just a reminder, everyone in the audience, if you have questions for our panelists, please just put them in the Q&A box, and then we'll obviously get those answered. In the meantime, I would like to find out from Stanley, like, what is your view in terms of the future, like what's coming in terms of the security challenges, and do you have any practical tips that you could share with the audience in terms of how to prepare for these security challenges, and how to, again, if we consider that all of us have limited resources and limited budgets, like what is it that we should be doing?
Thank you so much, Anna. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The future is here with us. And I'll start with the people. The demographics have changed. The Gen Zs are here and they're getting to work. Gen Ys have been there. And for them, experience is very important, whether it's experience in the office or outside the office. So they're used to tools that are very, very versatile, agile, nimble, and they don't want to wait so long. The instant gratification sense. So we need to prepare for that kind of generation so that we put in place measures that can help them be productive, whereas being secure. So how do we balance now for the Gen Ys and Gen Zs, the productivity and the security? We need to have very, very versatile tools to enable them to still be productive, at the same time being secure. And also training them about the risks out there on the dark web, on the internet. So it's about the demographics changing. That's number one. Number two is the explosion of devices, billions of devices out there with the Internet of Things. So how do we manage that service that's so exploded so much? The attack service is exploded. A particular person like you, Anna, has maybe like 5 devices with 5 different IP addresses. So imagine managing all that with the limited budget we have, limited bandwidth we have, limited security tools we have. And remember, if 100% of the budget was about storage and server capacity and memory capacity, only about 7% or less is on security. So there are competing interests and priorities. So with the IoT, with explosion of devices, we need to be careful that we need to prioritize security expenditure. And finally, with AI coming into place, we need to use AI to help enhance security, not to mess it up. But there is an ethical AI that could misuse people's data and introduce bias. Okay? That impacts on security. We need to use AI to help, obviously, fast track data patterns and trends that can help us reduce fraud and security incidents. So AI will be leveraged as much as possible because a human can do only so much, and they take breaks, lunch breaks, bathroom breaks. But with AI, it won't have to take those breaks. It can keep crunching that data and start showing us dashboards in real time, a single source of truth for the kind of threats, attacks that are just about to happen or could happen, and model those kind of threats, predict kind of threats that can happen in the future. So that's where I see it going in terms of demographics, in terms of IoT and 5G coming in place, and AI that is ethical to help us with the fight against cyber attackers. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanley. So like just to summarize, the way I understood it is to, and it will be a challenge, I know, it's not easy, but it is so important. And I think that also links to executives and management awareness creation, is for the security officers or people responsible for security to demand higher budgets for security. I mean, we can't move into the 4th industrial revolution or any great things if we don't secure the environment. So security can no longer be an afterthought. It has to be prioritized. And the only way we can do that is by really going to board level or executive management and making it an issue there. And the way to get there, by the way, is through VIP awareness campaigns, again, like really bringing them in early on and making them part of your journey in the awareness and culture phase. And then secondly, you mentioned, preparing for sort of the amount of IoT devices and devices in general, addressing the younger generation and their demands of sort of instant gratification, and everything must be there now. And then lastly, looking at AI and automation technologies to help bridge that gap. I mean, it's the same in Kenya, I'm sure. In South Africa, we do have a massive security skills shortage. So yeah, automation and AI can definitely help that to a certain extent, it's like Stanley said, it definitely is an option to do the data analysis 24/7. Thanks, Stanley. And then maybe Dennis, just your point of view, like any practical advice you could share with the audience in terms of what to focus on, where to prioritize their efforts in terms of protecting against current and future attacks.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much. Yes, we have to look at the future, but of course, we need to know where we're coming from. It's critical so that we can address the future very well. Because with the COVID-19, everybody is scampering to say, go remote working, procure this kind of technology, do this. If it is not properly planned, it can also have related problems. And so we need to first know where we're coming and understand this problem. Cybersecurity crime is a monster which needs to be tackled very carefully. And as I stated earlier, a lot of digitalization is going on. So as we digitalize, we need to know the risks associated with digitalization. And one of the key risks is actually cybercrime. So cybercrime is top as one of the key risks as far as digitalization is concerned. And therefore, we need to focus on a few things, which my colleagues have said. Number one, we need to, first of all, understand our strategies in terms of the kind of business we are managing. If you have a strategy, maybe to invest more on other applications to improve on your businesses. Now, cybercrime has come in and you definitely need to procure a software to help you manage this. Then definitely you may have to have a strategic drift on a shift on that. So that is one thing we need to look into very, very carefully, our strategic plans. In the middle of the COVID, a lot of companies actually had to review their strategic plans. So we need to do that and be able to see that we can manage this risk better. But most important is as I read from, again, one of the statistics came out prominently that approximately $6 trillion is expected to be spent globally on cybersecurity by 2021. This is a whopping figure. It's really big, and this is not coming from, it's coming from all our companies. And we need to spend this money and therefore get value out of it. So I know, as I said earlier, most companies will rush and spend and trying to see that they manage this, which is rightly so because the risk is high. But as I said, there are risks which are clearly associated with the one, the kind of technology you are going to procure. Two, the third-party risk vendor, the vendor you're going to deal with, is also another thing you need to look into and see that you manage very well. Number three, the regulations which are governing this. You need to understand the new regulations which are coming on board, which are now governing this. And people are doing this, but there's a lot of regulation coming on board, and that can also affect our businesses. But of course, there are operational, pretty operational things, like my colleagues have said. We need to do a lot of security training awareness, which I know is going on in most organizations. We need to train our staff and make them appreciate and understand the challenges and the risks associated with cybersecurity crime, so that they appreciate and they be able to manage. As my colleague said, and I also repeated, the biggest problem is actually the people. As they say, 95% of the cybersecurity businesses breaches are actually people error. So we need to focus more on that while we address the other things. So the people aspect again comes prominently on that. Then we need to share lessons. There are a lot of lessons coming, especially from the Western world. We need to share this, and I'm happy that the presentation which was made earlier actually points in some of these things. So we need to share that so that we are able to understand some of the complicated aspects of this monster called cybersecurity, cybercrime, so that we are able to manage it in a more informed manner. We, of course, need to get buy-in. you can't manage risk without involving the top management, the board, the money, and the top management must have a buy in this so that you can get the support in terms of budgetary allocations. As I said previously, very few companies would budget for this. When COVID came, most companies did not even have the remote working to software or tools, but it was something which was urgent and on demand, and companies were forced to exceptionally approve this and have it on board. Now that is in place, and you want to continuously monitor it and be able to be sure that yes, this is properly managed. We need to continuously incorporate more aspects of automation. How the businesses, more businesses now are relying. We are getting that element of physical touch is almost coming. I mean, it's so much minimized now. Customers now do businesses online, as I said, mobile, computing. People are doing businesses. So as we need to automate more, because there's a challenge of managing the risk, but also not achieving the return. So the risk return aspect is critical. We can focus, yes, on cybersecurity and eventually kill the business. So you want to see that what are the critical business channels which can really, I mean, help us as we manage this risk, but we are also sustainable. That of course brings the aspect of business continuity, which is very, very critical. So we need to look at that and therefore have robust business continuity plans which are able to counter on this. I know that in the region, very few companies actually have tested business continuity plans. That's why I said in the beginning that when COVID-19 pandemic came on board, some companies hardly survived even 2 months. They were not able to pay salaries. So how then are you going to manage this with the heightened cybercrime, which is a very expensive thing? So we need to have business continuities which address this. And when you are looking at a business continuity, you are basically looking at the survival of a business beyond 5 years or 10 even going. You're looking very far. And therefore, you have to start reviewing the aspect of resources, be able to look into the aspect of what are the kind of businesses which will take us 5 years from now or 10. What things should we drop? What are the unnecessary costs we should put aside so that we can focus on this and therefore be able to manage? It will not only be cyber security crime risk which will be there. There will be other risks, and even other emerging risks will be coming on board. And that will also call for more budgetary attention. So we need to focus on that and be able to have a business continuity plan which is flexible, and you are able to review it and test on a regular basis so that you are able to gauge on your business. Otherwise, Africa and the region, Uganda and East Africa, we have businesses which have, they are yet to stand the test of time, and that is the critical aspect. How many businesses have survived, have lived beyond 50 years in the region? They are probably countable. You can just count. There are very few. Now with this kind of risk, cybercrime, which as I said, is a monster. The hackers can sweep. It can sweep the business in just minutes or hours if you don't manage it. So we need to now be very, very careful, because the kind of risk which are coming is no longer the risk which it has to go to the board for us to collapse, or what. Somebody sits somewhere and is able to manipulate your systems, do everything, and you just collapse tomorrow. So it is a real thing, and we need to manage it. I thank you.
Dennis, thank you. Just to summarize what you said, I hope I understood it all correctly, but you did say some of the areas to focus on, especially now, is third-party risk. I think with SolarWinds and now the Microsoft vulnerabilities, that definitely is high on the agenda. The people aspect, security and awareness, training of the staff, also importance of collaborating, sharing lessons with each other amongst different industries, but also amongst different countries. We need to get buy-in from the top. Nothing will happen without executive level support. look at, and this is also what Stanley said, look at the automation, the fact that, the physical touch is now minimized in Africa. Things are done online on the mobile device. And then I suppose most importantly, to look at business continuity as a sort of, not just a once-off exercise, but something that has to continuously be tested and revisited and be done in like sort of a 5-year plan ahead. So thank you for all of these great points, Stanley. I appreciate it. There is a question from the audience, Frederick from Rwanda. Welcome, Frederick. And he is asking, and maybe Dennis, if you don't mind answering that, he's asking, how do we make sure our security software is working well and is relevant? I think that's quite a loaded question, because that is, like, how do you prove a negative? If it's not working, then you get hacked. So that's always the problem we have with security, right?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. First of all, before it begins from the procurement. If you're going to procure a software, you should understand first the purpose. For what purpose did you want it, and where are you procuring it from? Who is the vendor? Is it a non-vendor? The risk begins from there, because when you procure it, definitely you will have to go through the tests. You must do tests to ensure that before you really bring it on implement it or get it live, you have tested it and it's working. So that is one way to ensure that it's working. You don't roll out without just going through those processes. The IT people will tell you they understand this well. You must go through all the tests, and you must satisfy yourself that, yes, this has passed the test and we can now use this software. Now, when the software comes on board, that is not the end. You need to put in parameters to measure the performance of that software vis-a-vis the standards which were agreed, so that at every regular time, maybe monthly or what, you should be seeing whether it's delivering as expected. So again, those measures must be in place, and you should be able to articulate that in a management meeting and say yes. But also important, you should know the lifespan or whatever of such. Some of these things, you might be procuring and it's only for 1 year, it gets obsolete. So you need to understand that experts should be telling you that, this software has been replaced with the version number, this version this. So you need to understand that, so that you don't buy a software which is already a version remaining 1 year to expire, and yet there is another version. So there's quite a lot to do for you to manage that. And that is what they call proactive risk management, as far as the IT licenses and softwares are concerned. I thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. There's another question from the audience. This time it's Hilda. She's asking, what are the risks associated with open source security solutions? Maybe Faith, if you don't mind going into that.
All right, great. So before we go into the security risks associated with open source solutions, maybe something to also add on to what Evans was talking, or rather, sorry, Dennis was talking about with regards to how do you ensure that you're getting technology that is fit for purpose, technology that is fit for purpose and that actually works for the organization. Again, it's something that we talked about earlier, but it all goes back to risk-based decision making. So if you're sitting there and you're influenced by what is currently trending in the market, and then we say there's something called EDR, let's get an EDR. I heard there's something called a SOA, that is security orchestration for response of incident management, right? Then let's get a SOA. But what is this SOA coming to ride on? If you do not have an active threat intelligence platform, a SOA will not make sense, and it will definitely not deliver the results that you want or you expect. And so the first thing is to actually make sure that you are making risk-based and informed decisions from a perspective of a strategy. So you align with the strategy of the organization, then you come up with a cybersecurity strategy that is going to enable the organization reach where they intend to go. And a cybersecurity strategy will actually actively point to where the gaps are and tell you the technologies that can help you to achieve the strategy faster. And that way you find that if you're going to buy an endpoint solution which is centrally managed, it's because there's a reason. If you're going to buy a SOA, it's because there's actually a reason that this decision has been informed by a risk assessment or specific gaps that you identified. Then after that, now you can do the procurement and making sure that you're actually buying like software that you advertised for, and even testing to make sure that it is what you ordered. Now onto what Hilda is asking about open source technology. So from my perspective as a consultant, what I have come to see is that open source technology is dope. It's amazing. Reason being, it's a platform that is available publicly, and then these software owners call experts from different regions to participate and to help build, collaborate to build sound software. So we have very good open source technology out there. And first of all, it is not wrong to use open source technologies in an environment, because if you're looking like, say, for example, a network intrusion detection system, there is something called a security onion, or even if you're looking at a tool or a honeypot that can attract attackers to basically attack your network, so that you can be able to learn what are some of the ways that attackers are using today to be able to attack us. There is something called the modern honeynet framework, which basically allows you to expose fake ports, fake servers externally and even internally, and try to see what exactly an attacker is going to use, what attack vectors an attacker is going to use to attack the organization, right? So software technology is awesome, or rather open source technology is awesome and is also good to use in an environment. However, the downside again is that you have to be very mindful of the software open source technology that you're getting. You have to be very mindful of where you're getting it from. And also you have to be mindful of the reputation of the owner of the software. So again, you have to do due diligence. When you are deciding to use open source technology. Say, for example, you want to do network monitoring using Zabbix. You need to do due diligence on this particular software. So how long has it been in operation? What are the reviews from end users? And then again, if you're going to download it, the second thing is to make sure that you're actually downloading it from the company's original site. So download the software, and even when you get it into your environment, you need to test it first in like a malware sandbox environment or a safe detonation space where you know that it is not in the network. You can even run it on a server that is segregated from the network. Test it, make sure that it is actually not infected. Make sure that this is software that you can even do like virus hashing, checking on open source platforms such as VirusTotal, just to make sure that you have a file that is legitimate. So the risks, basically, most of the time, the risk associated with open source technology is number one, fact that if you download it from not the legitimate vendor's site, you risk ending up with software that is infected. Then also the other thing about open source technology is support. So, you get software, and then if you have an agreement with someone who you're paying a license for, you can always go back to them and tell them, you sold me this software and now it's not working correctly, right? And so I need for you to support me to be able to fix the issues that I'm having. And so again, the other risk with open source technology is that you have no one to fall back on, apart from the open source platforms where the communities where they discuss issues around software, yeah? So you won't again have the support that you require. So again, it is based on the risk appetite of the organization. What's your appetite like? And then again, also informed by the financial constraints. If at all you do not have a budget to get a corporate license for a network monitoring tool and you can get Zabbix, why not, right? It serves the purpose even before you get the budget to be able to acquire the software that you want. So it has to be a risk-based decision again, that you have to weigh in on what technology you want to use. But then again, make sure that whatever it is that you're using is not on critical assets. Like, for example, getting open source database management, DBMS, it's not a wise idea, because this is software that is actually supporting your critical infrastructure.
Thanks, Faith. Yeah, I think like what I've also come across, it's literally, you may save the money on the licenses, but then you're so dependent on the one person in your organization who actually knows how to do it. And when that person leaves, what do you do then? So the risk is the people more so than the tech necessarily. There are two more questions, but I'm afraid we're running a little bit out of time, so I just want to quickly go into those and then maybe just wrap up and ask each of the panelists to give their 1 minute wrap up. The one question is from Nelly, and she's asking, in a board training on cybersecurity, what would be the key subtopics that the board should be trained on that is key for them to know in line with cybersecurity? So I'm quickly going to try and answer that, because I had to do that a lot of the times for multiple of our organizations, but then obviously if the panelists want to add to that, please do. So if you consider the board or the executives, those are people that have no time. So they literally, if you're lucky, they give you 5 minutes to state your case. So you have to really be very succinct, to the point, using statistics and sort of facts rather than some long-winded, they don't care about the security stories or the like our acronyms so much. So it has to be really succinct. And in fact, I lie, if you have a good story that shows what happened in an organization, in your industry, I mean, that is something nice to bring in, but it really needs to be quite short and to the point. And the top topics that I would bring up is really sort of the increase of cybercrime threats, the responsibilities that board members have in terms of their regulative requirements, and then sort of the gaps or the risks that are really facing your organization. So really bring it down to, okay, what do we need to do? Like, what is it that you want us to assign budget for? So literally like the awareness, and then go straight into what is it that you want them to do. And then lastly, something that has worked really well in some of our organizations, they got the executives to actively take part in their cybersecurity awareness program by asking them to share a 1 minute video about their thoughts on cybersecurity. And then that way it is very low cost, and it shows commitment from the top level management, and people look at what their leaders are doing. And in a way, you're roping the executive into your program very subtly and getting their support. There's another question from Hilda. She says, what advice would you give towards managing the organization stakeholders in regards to the threats associated with fake clone domains? I think that's a good question maybe for Stanley. I wonder, or Dennis, both of you, I mean, I'm sure if being a financial institution, you have to deal with this on a daily basis, right? So maybe you have some tips to share here.
Thank you so much, Anna. Threats associated with fake clone domains. This looks like a phishing attack, very clever phishing attack. Fake cloned domains. So the first advice would be, you have a robust program for security awareness training, because if you had a robust and effective program for security awareness training, then you'd know that that's a fake domain, and you don't click on that fake domain. Number one, a robust, well thought out program. Number two is obviously simulating this kind of fake clone domains as you train your users. You must simulate it. So that's not the first time you have seen this fake cloned domain. So you're living it every day. It's not something that happens once in a year. You live it daily. So simulated cloned domains. Number three is, you must give incentives to those who are doing well. You must buy them lunch or do whatever it takes you must incentivize them, the ones who are doing well. That way, that sends a message that we want this kind of behavior to be entrenched against this other kind of behavior. So it's about you must reward good behavior. So it's all about a robust security awareness training program, and it's all about ensuring it's a continuous process. It's not done once in a quarter. Also ensuring that the board is the one that owns it. And once the board owns it, they will have it trickle down. They'll have it cascade down to all echelons, to all places, to all hierarchies of the organization. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. This has been quite a long session already, so I'm going to go through making the rounds and ask each of you for your closing thoughts, please. And I believe that if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about KnowBe4 and how we can help address the challenge, like I said, we have an automatic platform that simplifies a lot of the admin behind doing the simulations. We've got, I don't know how many thousands, I think it's over 2,000 pieces of content. It's like a Netflix of security awareness, where you can assign different content to different user groups. Because we are situated in South Africa, popcorn trading, we're still producing content with local audience in mind. So there's not American accents, it's there's some South African accents, but we also try and bring in more you know, like more African accents here and there. So yeah, if you want to learn more about that, please do get in touch with us, or I believe there's a survey that we send out later on. And again, thanks so much for your time. And I'd like to just go back to Dennis, just a 1 minute closing thoughts or takeaway that you would like to share with the audience, Dennis. Oh, you're still on mute. Dennis, you're still on mute. We can't hear you.
Hello. Yes.
No, we hear you.
Sorry. Yes, I'm very sorry. Yes, I was saying that I must thank the organizers and the audience and the participants and my colleagues who have also been in the panel. It has been a good thing. And as I said, since we're in a virtual world, I believe that we need to have more of these things on a regular basis, because the emerging risks are taking shape. And I believe that the world is changing in a manner that we need to really be ready to encounter such risks, because COVID-19 has taught us a lot of lessons, and we now need to assert ourselves and be ready for more of such emerging risks, so that we continue to survive and our businesses survive. So I thank you so much, the organizers, and I wish you a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dennis. Really appreciate all your wisdom and your insights. Thank you. And I agree with you. I think that we should have more collaborative, approaches, and seeing how we can all work with each other and try and tackle this big elephant together. We can't do it by ourselves. I'm going to go to Stanley, and then Faith, you will get the final say. So Stanley, thank you for contributing.
Yes, Anna, so what I would say is that we need to have a comprehensive approach to how to respond to these cyber attacks. A comprehensive approach, starting with the people, and by people I mean we must train them. We must change the culture and the behavior. So people first. Then the process, we must obviously embed the right process, whether it's ISO 27001 or ISO 22301 for business continuity management. So we must have the right processes and the right standards and the right frameworks put in place. And this should be checked and updated yearly. And then finally, the technology. We must check how technology can help enforce these policies, these things we want to do. Technology like antivirus, ADR, database activity monitoring, vulnerability management. All these technologies can help enforce these best practices, but we must start with the people first. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Couldn't agree more. Faith, you have the final say.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And first of all, thanks to the panelists and also to you, Anna, for the very great insights towards this discussion. It's definitely been a very interesting panel discussion. For me, what do I think is top most important is, again, something that Stanley has mentioned, which is culture. So if we want all these information security initiatives to succeed, we need for the culture to be embedded in the organization. But even so, we need top management to actually buy into what we are actually trying to achieve. And so for me, what would I say would be the most critical thing is that we need to have a culture shift, and especially from top management and from the governance bodies, to realize that this fight against cybersecurity cannot be done by one organization only, cannot be done by one industry only, that all key players have to be involved. And so what this means is that cybersecurity and information security discussions cannot be an A or B in these senior management meetings. They cannot be like last minute agendas or something that you say we can put it in the back burner and discuss in the next meeting. It needs to take first priority because as you've already seen in what the panelists talked about, the fact that with remote working, it's going to be a thing now. And to afford remote working, we are seeing a lot of migration to cloud services. So when you migrate your platform and your operations to the cloud, again, we're looking at an even bigger risk. We're looking at new levels of awareness that are required for across the entire organization. We're also looking at management actually making sound decisions with regards to what cloud service provider are we going with and why. And so again, then this means that awareness on information security needs to start all the way at the top, and that this culture, if it is coming from the top, it will trickle down to the entire organization in a very perfect way. And we have started the journey towards winning the fight against cyber crime. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faith. And once again, Stanley, Dennis, Faith, your experience, your insights, it's really appreciated. I think all of us feel the same, that it's an honor to be able to, talk to you and get your views. And I've learned a lot, so thank you. And I'm hoping as the audience that this was valuable. We do have a little survey that we will please ask you to fill out, just to let us know what we can maybe do better next time. And also if you would like to find out more about certain topics. And yeah, from my side as well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I can't wait for these lockdowns to be over, because Kenya was the place that I enjoyed the most when we were allowed to travel, and I'd love to go back there and do this again sometime, maybe in person. Until then, it has to be virtual, right?
Yeah. But you're welcome, definitely. We really do not have a lockdown going on here. It's just a curfew. It means that at night you're not allowed to walk around. But apart from that, you're still flying around. You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Faith. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Jumbo.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye.